The topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome to Leadership for Life with Gina Gardner on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV. Join your host, who is a multiple #1 international best-selling author, motivational speaker, empowerment and transformational leadership coach and trainer. She's the founder of Genuinely-You and has 30 years experience of helping people step into their genuine, authentic power. And now, here is Gina Gardner, your host of Leadership for Life.
Hello there. And a huge welcome to the show. And as always, I've got an amazing guest to share with you. Michael Cahill and I go back a long way. We both trained in neuro-linguistic programming in 2005 together. But more about that later. I just want to remind you that anybody who comments or asks a question during a live show or contacts me through Gina Gardner or Gina at Genuinely-You to make a comment or question, that we will donate to B1G1. More about that later if you don't know about it. But please then choose which thing you would like us to donate to, whether that's education, put an E, feeding the hungry, put an F, clean water, put a W, or the environment, put an E. Now, I want to talk to you about managing our emotions. I was involved in a really interesting discussion on Clubhouse today, all about bullying. What was interesting is that they had done a questionnaire around a poll around bullying. And it asked how many people felt that they had been bullied in the workplace. 93% of people who responded to this, and many people responded to the poll, said that they had been bullied in the workplace. When we were involved in the discussion, it was about, how do you manage that? What can you do? How can you avoid it? One of the things that came up is that not only had most people been bullied in the workplace, but a very large proportion of people had felt that they were bullied at school or in their family or in their friendship contacts. And it struck me that it was really quite opposite that was happening today, because our theme is about how do you manage your emotional state. And when Michael comes on, we're going to be talking about that in the context of leadership and business. But I just want to start the show by asking you to think about how often you go into a place where you are not really in control of your emotions. Now, I don't mean that you're completely out of control, but I do mean that actually you're not thinking about them, that your conscious mind's not involved, and so you're being reactive to something rather than truly engaging with your emotional state and making informed decisions about how you are going to be and how you're going to respond. You look in the news, there's incident after incident which is created because somebody has lost their temper or somebody has gone out of control. Whether we're talking about gun or knife crime or talking about domestic abuse, all of those things, which are pretty heavy going, all of those stem from people not being in control of their emotions and the state in which they operate within the world. Now, it's easy for me to sit here, I'm not under pressure, and you could say, well, it's just a spur of the moment thing, it's just, you can't help it, it's just a reaction. But the reality is you can help it. It's your choice whether or not you are mindful about things. And we're going to explore some strategies in terms of business, but they're just as useful in your personal life and in your personal relationships. But before we get on to that after the break, I just want to share with you some examples that I've commonly come across. I need to put my teeth in with clients. The situation where People believe that they're a victim to what's going on, and that people are being unkind to them or unfair to them, or they don't feel as if they have a voice. And I ask the question, so how have you handled it? And they look back at me, and often quite blankly, especially if they're new clients. And I ask them to think about, how have you been, and how do you believe that that has either allowed people to get away with things, or it's contributed to things getting more volatile, or that they've just been a passive victim to what's gone on. And there are any number of other reactions too, but they're perhaps three of the main ones. And it's interesting for me when I'm working with people, how getting them to understand that they actually have the power to change things simply by the way in which they're being, that for some people is what turns things around. Because instead of being a passive victim to what goes on, they take control of their life. They become the leaders of their own life, step into their genuine power. Now, that can feel overwhelming if it's not your way of being naturally, but you can learn how to do it. And the old saying, fake it till you make it, is really quite useful, because, people will say, well, I don't feel confident to do that. But the reality is that the more you do it, the more confident you'll be at it. And ultimately, mastering your own state gives you the power and control over your destiny. When you're not managing your own state, you are so much in the throes of that emotional state and in other people's reactions to that emotional state that you leave yourself incredibly vulnerable, and indeed, at times, the other person. I think about when I was a head teacher or principal, and the parents would say to me, I can't control him at home or her at home. They're rude to me. They won't help. They just won't do as I tell them. But I come to school and they do as what you want. And what's the difference? And the difference was quite small and yet quite profound. The first thing is I expected to be listened to. That my body language, my frame of mind was, of course you're going to listen to me. Why wouldn't you? Where parents very often get into that white noise, it's almost all like being in a tumble dryer, that noise just grumbles on in the background, and the children are doing something that you don't want them to do. And, parents are getting very irritable and telling them off or shouting at them and wondering why the children aren't listening. And it's because you are in a state that they are used to. There's no difference for them. Oh, there she goes again, or there he, oh, it's just daddy's angry, or oh, mum's nagging again. Because there is nothing that punctuates that particular state and makes it any different from earlier in the day or yesterday or last week. And one of the things for women to recognize is that the tone of their voice is very similar to that of children. Men generally have a lower voice, which stands outside the noise that children are making. And so when you lower your voice, and I would say not only lower the pitch, but you start to speak quietly, instead of it becoming a competition of who can shout the loudest, that in my experience, children will start to quieten down and to listen. But of course, the other thing is that what you say has to be backed up with what you do consistently. And this is true for children, teenagers, partners, and indeed in your work colleagues or your team. That if you say something, but you don't follow it through, the next time you say it, people won't listen. Now, if you say that and you're irritable, you're frustrated, you're angry, what people hear is the tone, and they don't hear the essence of what you're trying to say. So learning to have a neutral voice gives them far less wriggle room, because instead of them being triggered by that tone of voice, that irritability, the fact that you're shouting at them, They have to then, or they're more likely then, to listen to what you have to say rather than the way in which you're saying it. And all of that requires you to manage your state first. And I'd say to you, if you're a parent and you're listening to this, or if you have a partner where you tend to argue, or you're in the workplace, manage your state first. Take some deep breaths. We're going to learn lots of techniques and the importance of that after the break. But go away from the situation and come back. But recognize that if you say you're going to do something, the minute you don't do it, you've lost the game. So go back to parents. How often do you use the word no? One of the reasons as a principal or head teacher, it worked very well for me is I only used no when I meant it. I didn't use the word no if I was going to give in. If I was not sure whether I was going to say yes or no, I'd say, well, convince me, I'll think about it. But when I actually said the words no, 2 letters, very little word, it was incredibly powerful because it meant no. And so they didn't kick against it. They knew that they could dance along that line, but if they went over the line, that they would find that there were consequences. And so I would say to you, if you want an easier life where your children listen to you, your partner listens to you, then cultivate your own state of being. Manage your voice. Use a neutral voice as I am using now, rather than one that's got a whine or an edge to it. Because the minute there is that edge to it, people grab hold of that instead of grabbing what you're saying and listening to it. Ultimately, as I say so often on this show, you're the common denominator. You take you into every situation. And I can pretty well guarantee that if you don't manage your state in one situation, it's pretty likely that you do it in other situations too. So whether we're talking about your personal life or your professional life, managing your state and learning how to do that effectively and consistently is a real game changer. Now, after the break, I'm going to introduce Michael Cahill to you. He's a great friend, and he's an amazing guy with so many levels to his experience. And we're going to explore how managing your state can help in leadership roles, in business, and so on. So don't go away. I'll see you after the break.
You have been listening to Gina Gardner on Leadership for Life. We'll be back after this quick break. Want to get the best out of life personally and professionally? Are you ready to step into a life which excites and fulfills you? Well, the right place for you is Leadership for Life with Gina Gardner on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV. We will share with you stories from inspiring people, a wide range of guest experts, and lots of practical strategies to help you get the very best out of your personal and professional life. Leadership for Life is a radio and TV show focused on helping you live a happier, more successful, and fulfilling life. Join international best-selling author, motivational speaker, empowerment and transformational leadership coach and trainer, Gina Gardner, live every Thursday, 1 p.m. Eastern Time on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV. Become the leader of your own life. Gina Gardner's #1 international best-selling book, Thriving Not Surviving, The 5 Secret Pathways to Happiness, Success, and Fulfillment, provides you with the foundational principles on which to become the best leader of your own life. It's available as an ebook, paperback, hardback, and as an audio from genuinely-you.com, or also from Amazon. Every one of the principles have been proven to work for the countless people who have used them, including the author. Now, let's put them to work for you. If you're ready to discover your true leadership life design, accelerate your journey with an invitation to join Gina for a Leadership for Life VIP Day. Choose your journey of self-discovery where Gina will help you navigate your way to happiness, success, and fulfillment. To find out more, email Gina at genuinely-u.com. Welcome back to Leadership for Life. Here is your host, Gina Gardner.
Hello there. Let me tell you a little bit about Michael. He's a highly experienced trainer, systemic coach and facilitator, blending a rich and deep knowledge of coaching and facilitation with considerable experience of business and investment. Michael spent 16 years as an equity analyst, 10 in a top-rated team at UBS. The author of the highly acclaimed The Financial Times Guide to Making the Right Investment Decisions and Coaching. He works with companies and individuals to transform their thinking and to create more value. And he's here to create more value with us. So without more ado, let me welcome Michael Cahill.
Hello, Gina. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. I'm so pleased to have you here.
It's good to be here.
Thank you. Why do you think that managing your state is so important for leaders?
Because I think very simply, if it's clear that you can't lead your own state, what permission does that give you to lead others? And lots of us talk about leadership and leadership coaching and the like, but you're only a leader if people are prepared to follow.
Yep.
And really, I think we're in an environment that is so complex and so volatile. And I've been looking at investment markets, as your introduction kindly said. I've been looking at investment markets since about 1983. And I can't remember the volatility and complexity being anything like this.
No.
So the reality is that we're in an external environment, and this is before we get to COVID, we're in an external environment that is really uncertain. Mm-hmm. And it's very easy in such an environment to fall into a trap of being very fearful of it.
Yeah.
And I think what great leaders can do is, because they can, as it were, self-regulate, and you've touched upon that in your piece a little bit, they can self-regulate and manage their own state, often through very simple devices such as kind of coherent breathing, which I can explain in a moment. But that ability to manage your own state is especially important when you're in an environment of uncertainty, where fear could very easily take over. And so I think leading in this environment, the current environment, you need leaders, and we're all looking for leaders who create safety.
Yes.
And for that, they've got to feel very secure and be very, very mindful in their own body to create the safety for others. And that's something that I think is really interesting for us, particularly those leaders who perhaps gain their position through a lot of expertise.
Yeah.
You know, that their status, if you will, and their position in the organization comes from being an expert. And now in a leadership role, I think if we're all honest and put our hands up, we've got no idea what's going on.
No.
You know, just think of the supply chain crisis. What's inflation going to be like in 18 months' time? Where interest rates going to be? How strongly or otherwise is the economy going to bounce back? Hybrid working, etc. So the trick is, you know, and I think this would be, if you like, a conversational way of putting it, is anybody can be confident when they know everything that's going on. But
yeah, it's easy to be confident when things are going well, isn't it?
But can you be confident with all of this uncertainty around? And again, you mentioned this in the teaching analogy. I'll put it in a leadership context, although it's obviously both contexts are about leadership. So how can you show up, if you will, exuding confidence, creating safety, creating confidence in you, even when you don't know what's going on, even when. And so can you be confident at the same time as you feel highly uncertain? And I think that's a real skill for leadership. And it's something that interests me a great deal. Because I think in a lot of organizations, if you talking about this leadership and state, I think a lot of organizations, there is a climate of fear. I think that cost cutting, restructuring, the pressure to perform, having to hit targets, whether they be financial or otherwise, there's a lot of pressure. And I think inadvertently, those environments create a state of pressure and a state of fear. Am I going to have my job? And I just think that, again, as leaders, we have to kind of say, well, actually, this pressure and this state that the organization is in isn't going to be one in which performance can be delivered. So as leaders, I think you're responsible for the implicit, if you like, the culture. And if there's a culture of fear, and you mentioned bullying, if there's a culture of bullying, people at the top have to take responsibility for that. What is the climate? What is the state that allowed that? And I think just on that, which is a slight deviation from what I was going to intend, I think to say, but I think a really useful triangle that I think helps leaders in this responsibility to create an environment within which people can flourish is that there's a triangle of what's sometimes referred to as the 3 deep hungers. Mm-hmm. And one of those is psychological safety. Yeah. People perform best when they feel safe. And so as a leader, are you doing that for your organization? Do you see it as even something in your leadership skill set, creating psychological safety? Because it's vital for those that work with you. Yes. And it's vital for them to show up fully as they are and to contribute fully. They need to feel psychologically safe. The other dimension of this triangle, if you will, is recognition. People need to be seen and heard. That also adds to the safety, I would argue, but it's a separate element. What do you do to make sure people are recognized, and not just recognized for achieving a goal, but just recognized for who they are and what they bring? And both are important. And the other aspect of this is, are you creating an environment, a state, if you will, where people feel that they belong? They know the rules of belonging and they know how to belong. And if they make a mistake, they can receive feedback in a culture that doesn't threaten that belonging. It supports it. So it's not, something that's going to jeopardize them or put them into fear. Because then I hear this from a lot of my clients, is that they keep saying, well, no one will take risks in this organization. Well, no kidding, because if they make a mistake, they're really punished and they don't feel psychological safety and their belonging would be jeopardized if they were to make a mistake. Why would you take a risk? And so all of these things, I think, feed into creating an environment that allows performance. And I think it's very easy, and I get this with clients, where people want to focus on the performance first. And what I'm trying to encourage us to consider is actually we need to create the state. We need to create the environment where people feel seen, where they feel safe, both physically and emotionally and psychologically, and where they belong. And that produces the performance.
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, what you've offered is really rich, and I'd just like to unpick a few things within that. For me, great leaders are able to demonstrate leadership in a way that offers hope. And for me, when you have leaders who are working from a place of fear, one of the casualties of that is that people's vulnerability levels go up, as you said, so they don't perform well, and it becomes a self-perpetuating but spiraling down situation where the more they fear and the less they feel that they have ownership or that they are seen, the worse they perform. So the more draconian the situation becomes, and so you end up with an ever decreasing performance. Whereas those leaders who actually are confident without being ego-driven or arrogant, who recognize that the The solution lies in bringing the team together and using the very best that you have within the team together. Those businesses are going to thrive. But I think for too long we've seen businesses that have been driven by fear. And it's one of the reasons why, I mean, the statistics are scary. Before the pandemic, 2019, in the UK alone, absenteeism because of stress cost £70 billion. And presenteeism, where people were present but not operating effectively because they were under stress, is thought to have cost well over twice that. And if you consider that in the Western world, it is probably not much different wherever you go, even without the human cost of that, that's an appalling waste, isn't it?
It's an incredible waste, and that stress and the burnout that seems to characterize a lot of organizations, and perhaps we can come back to that in a moment. And I just want to kind of reiterate that point about hope. I think that's absolutely right. It is about hope, but that hope has to be grounded.
Oh, I agree. Absolutely.
Rather than being delusional, if you see what I mean.
We're not talking about Pollyanna here, are we?
No, exactly. And I think that it's the hope that comes from having the flexibility and awareness that there are other ways through this.
Yes.
And you are seeing the problem very, very clearly. And it's that lovely concept from Jim Collins's book, Good to Great, which is one of the business books that I really enjoy. And he, in that, introduced me, if not others, to the concept of the Stockdale paradox. You know, that and the Stockdale paradox was that Stockdale was somebody who was imprisoned in a Japanese prisoner of war camp at the beginning of the war, the very beginning of the war, and survived the whole period, which was incredibly rare. And he was asked, well, was it because you were more optimistic or more hopeful? And he said, no. He said, the optimists were dead by Christmas. He said, what you have to do in that situation is confront the brutal reality and know you will prevail.
Yes.
And I think that that's, again, coming back to this notion of state, it's this thing, is you've got to confront and acknowledge the reality that you're in and really connect through state to the resources you have to deal with this reality. And so I think in terms of state and state management, I think that it might be useful to sharing the three drivers of state, which are really, number one, focus, number two, physiology, and number three, language.
Yeah.
Those are the three principal drivers that we can control ourselves. You made a great point in the piece, in your introductory piece, about having agency. Yeah. And I'm encouraging us here to perhaps slice that agency down and say, right, okay, what is it that you're going to focus on first? And that piece about hope, and you also alluded to it, Gina, is, are you going to focus on the problem or are you going to focus on the solution?
Yeah.
Because energetically, in terms of driving state, you can see that's very, very different. Because if I keep focusing on the problem, I'm going to make myself even more scared than I was to begin with.
And if you watch the news, that's what's going on day after day after day.
Yes.
People are really focusing on the problem. What you focus on seems to expand, doesn't it?
Yes. You see, and in a business context, I think that's absolutely right about the news. And in a business context, if you focus on the problem, what will happen in a business context is that environment will quickly shift to blame.
Yeah.
So, blame and judgment are an integral part of the problem mindset, if you will.
Yeah.
Whereas if you focus on the solution, you're not looking to blame anybody.
No.
Because again, that's not going to make an environment where people feel safe or recognized if they're blamed. And invariably what happens and for those of the listeners in organizations and large organizations, or indeed small organizations, in most situations where things go wrong, it's the system that's the problem, not the individual.
Yeah.
But and the media does this, who's going to lose their job? We need to blame a person rather than look at the wider systemic forces and influences. And so I think the other things about that, if you focus on the problem, what you tend to find is that people believe the problem to be permanent. They believe it to be pervasive. The 3 Ps of the problem state, I call it. They believe the problem to be permanent, pervasive. It shows up in other parts of the organization or other parts of the individual, and personal. We make it personal. And as you get older in life, you realize nothing's personal. People are far too busy thinking about other things than you. So we need to get over that. But it's also a blessed relief when you move towards solutions. And I think that a lot of this other aspect of the problem mindset, if you're focused on the problem, is there's an incredible sense of cause and effect. A caused B, caused C. And again, that causality doesn't really work in the real world. It's much more complex than that. And the solution mindset doesn't assume that the solution is the opposite of the problem. You've got all of these resources you can connect with. And in this context, what's also fascinating, there's a writer that I'm particularly interested in systemic work called Bert Hellinger, who introduced family constellations to the world, and that work has been applied to business systems. But he makes a fantastic point about problems and solutions. He argues that problems attract company because everyone becomes curious about the problem. And everyone can then, whereas the solution can be quite lonely, because having, it's a bit like being happy can be a lonely place to hang out because everyone wants to be in their story, and the story attracts company
and
as
it gets
well.
bigger and worse and deeper and more difficult to deal with because we love to exaggerate it. Everybody adds their little 5 pence, don't they?
And what happens is, in an organizational setting, if the leader is doing that, they are recruiting the people they are leading into their view of the world that this is a problem, rather than what's the solution here. And the point that Hellinger makes, which I think is absolutely fascinating, is he argues, and in my experience, it's true. I mean, there's not empirical evidence, but just my own sort of felt sense of this is true, that he argues that resources only will serve a solution. So when you've got the solution in mind and you're focused on the solution, you'll find the resources.
And certainly that's been my experience in my own situation. As I go back to being a head teacher, we were the worst funded school in the district. But actually, when you look at what we did with our resources, we were actually engaging in a very, very different way. I'm conscious of time, and what I'd like to do, if that's agreeable with you, is, you talked about some very simple ways that people can adjust their state in order to feel it more resourced and more in control. And I'd be really grateful if you could share that.
Yes, happily. Just to put it in the context of the elements of state management, as it were, focus, physiology, and language. So we've talked about what do we focus on. Physiology is the quickest way to change state, is we move. As soon as we move, our physiology is different. There's a lot of work being done on fear by a lot of neuroscientists, and often the main solution is to move. And I think that's very, very interesting because physiologically that makes a lot of sense.
Well, go back to the fright and flight, doesn't it? You've got a lion chasing you, you run like hell.
Yeah, and then the emotion discharges itself. I don't say I'm afraid. You say I had a feeling of fear. That's very different to identifying with the fear. And that identification is really important. And this also comes back to language, and I'll come back to physiology in a moment. But the language is, again, what language are you using? Are you using language that is about the problem? Is it the language of blame? Or are you using language that's positive? Are you using language that is, and I think this is really important for leadership, Gina. If one thing kind of lands today, it would be this. And that is, given the focus piece and the language, using focus and language to really, really be clear about what you want rather than what you don't want or what you wish to avoid. So being very, very clear about what you want to focus on, because that will relax the physiology. So again, I often use this sort of metaphor of, I'm not a golfer, but if you're on a tee and you're about to hit the ball, and there's a lot of bunkers down the left-hand side, and I keep saying to myself, whatever you do, don't go in the bunker. Whatever you do, don't go in. You can probably feel how my physiology is changing as I program. The only thing I'm focused on is the bunker. Of course, the message should be, and again, metaphorically, I think this is just great in leadership, you've got to focus on the fairway. And just that simple thing on focusing on what you do want rather than avoiding what you don't, I think is a key tenet of leadership. It's because it's sustainable. Your point about the woolly mammoth, if you're running from the woolly mammoth, once you're away from the woolly mammoth, where do you go then? That's when you need the leadership of what it is you want to create. But the simple...
Can I just before you move on from there?
Yeah.
I think many people, and I'm sure you've come across them, you're talking about leadership in business, but I have to say that what we are talking about is just as important in your personal life as it is if you are a leader in a business or a company. That, recognize, do you know what you want? And often when I've worked with businesses and you talk to the team, they're not clear what is wanted. They're very clear about what isn't wanted, but actually being able to articulate that in a way that other people can take on board is really, really important. And if you're listening to this and you're a business owner or a business leader, and you've got some struggles in terms of getting the results that you want, this is a really great place to start. So sorry to interrupt you, but I think it's so important.
There's a lovely simple question of turning it round.
Yeah.
So, if I were coaching an individual, and I really love your point about the scalability of this, it works for the individual, it works for the team, it works for the function, it works for the organization. It's all of this material is very scalable. But at an individual level, if someone wants to lose weight, you can see that's something they want to avoid.
Yeah.
So the question would be, well, what's important to you about losing weight?
Yes.
And just that very simple question, and what's important to you is a question about values. So they might say, well, I'm speeding this up just for the interview process, but, they might say, well, I want to be fitter. Great. So what's important to you about being fit? I just want to feel lighter. Fantastic. What's important to you about feeling lighter? Well, I just will feel much better about myself if I'm lighter and fitter. Can you see the difference between being lighter and fitter?
Yes.
Compared to losing weight? And it's I share that because it's just a very simple and elegant coaching question that can turn the away from into what you want to move towards. The key thing that we're really talking about, because the quickest way to change state is to change physiology.
Yeah.
The quickest way to change physiology, and you've already touched on this, but just to really land it, is to change your breathing. And there are many ways that you can do that. But one of the things that is really, really vital, particularly in an uncertain environment, is we talked earlier about agency. Mm-hmm. If there's a lot of things that you haven't got control of, your breath is the one thing you do have control of. And so just that very simple notion of realizing, oh, I am in control of something. I'm in control of my breathing, and that breathing is affecting my state. And this is something that the Navy SEALs do a lot, and obviously their people are taught to do, because they're often in situations where they may not be in territory that they're familiar with. I mean, how much unknown is that? And the thing they're taught to do is to breathe evenly into their heart space, for a count of 6 and out for a count of 6. It's known as coherent breathing. And as you breathe in and out and you regulate that, what you're basically doing in terms of state is you're coming into a state of coherence, which basically means that the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system are in harmony. Once you've got balanced breathing, and notice, when we're tense, we tend to shorten our breath, we tend to be short of breath, and the breath is high up. So lowering the breath in and out for an equal count recalibrates the nervous system. So you get this coherence. And then that just takes practice. It's not a big deal. I would encourage people I work with, I encourage them to do it 2 minutes in the morning. And that entrains the body to realize that, oh, okay, I just need to come back into coherent breathing. And that creates then this coherence where there is what we would call relaxed alertness.
Yes.
Because we've got that, so we're not so, because in a leadership context, we could extend the out breath, which would be, if you like, more of a hypnotic phenomenon, which is to really relax somebody. That's brilliant for relaxation. But we're talking about in a leadership context, or indeed, if we're talking about the Navy SEALs, we're talking about situations where relaxed alertness and being in a state of readiness and a state of flow, but without all of that incessant chatter of the left hemisphere, which disappears actually when you're in a state of coherence. So there's a lot to be gained from that, and it is just very simple. And people will have their own favorite breath. I've shared one. There's lots of breathing techniques. People, that's why things like mindfulness are so important for leaders, because it really does create that capacity to regulate your state.
Yes.
So you can start taking in more information. You go into peripheral vision more easily, and you have more options.
Yeah.
And even if I just slow down my speaking, I can sense there's just more space to come from than when we're hurried and our breathing is too high in the chest. Because then people speed up, their thinking speeds up, their options close down as their thinking and breathing speeds up. That's the important thing in a business context, is you lose perspective. You lose a sense of options and what's available to you, because once you start breathing too high, you go into your left hemisphere and your thinking comes, we've got to do this or that.
Yeah.
That's a dilemma. It's not a choice. As leaders, we have to promote choice, and we have to give our teams choices. If you create a dilemma, what state is that going to create? It's either or. And then I'm going to get it wrong, aren't I? I'm either going to go for A or B. No, we need to be much more sophisticated. And again, from a place of coherence, we realize there's a number of possibilities and options here. And so this is vital for decision making. Absolutely vital that we don't box ourselves in to an either or decision, when by being coherent, by slowing things down, we can generate lots of options, lots of possibilities, and then have the resources to choose the one that serves our mission the best.
There's such a richness to what you're offering, and I hope that the people who are listening or watching this will recognize that these are very apparently simple things that everybody can do, but they have a profound impact on the quality of the way in which you lead your own life and the way in which you lead others. Michael, where can people get hold of you?
My email address is michael@marketmatters, all one word. So michael@marketmatters, all one word.
Sorry, I missed that out. That's my fault. Apologies.
Marketmatters, all one word, .co.uk.
Thank you. And we'll have those things in the show notes. Thanks very much, Roxy. Once again, our producer, Roxy, has saved my bacon. Thank you. That's brilliant. Just before we finish, those of you who watch the show will know that we are members of B1G1, Buy One, Give One. And one of the things that we ask all our guests is to choose one of 3 projects. We have 3 projects a month for us to donate to on their behalf. And you have chosen education for the Dalit girls in India. They are part of the group of girls who are most disadvantaged. They're part of the untouchables, lowest caste. And without the help of some of the projects like the one that we're going to be donating to, they get no education. And so their life chances are very, very much reduced. So thank you very much for choosing, and that will be going off on your behalf. Just before we go, once again, can you give people your contact details, and then we'll go into the break?
Yes, thank you, Gina. Thank you, everybody. Michael at marketmatters.co.uk.
Michael, thank you so much. We could talk for hours and often have done. But thank you for being on the show. Don't go away. We've still got a little bit of time left. I'll see you after the break. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you.
You have been listening to Gina Gardner on Leadership for Life. We'll be back after this quick break. Want to get the best out of life personally and professionally? Are you ready to step into a life which excites and fulfills you? Well, the right place for you is Leadership for Life with Gina Gardner on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV. We will share with you stories from inspiring people, a wide range of guest experts, and lots of practical strategies to help you get the very best out of your personal and professional life. Leadership for Life is a radio and TV show focused on helping you live a happier, more successful, and fulfilling life. Join international best-selling author, motivational speaker, empowerment and transformational leadership coach and trainer, Gina Gardner, live every Thursday, 1 p.m. Eastern Time on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV. Become the leader of your own life. Gina Gardner's #1 international best-selling book, Thriving Not Surviving, The 5 Secret Pathways to Happiness, Success, and Fulfillment, provides you with the foundational principles on which to become the best leader of your own life. It's available as an ebook, paperback, hardback, and as an audio from genuinely-u.com, or also from Amazon. Every one of the principles have been proven to work for the countless people who have used them, including the author. Now, let's put them to work for you. If you're ready to discover your true leadership life design, accelerate your journey with an invitation to join Gina for Leadership for Life VIP Day. Choose your journey of self-discovery where Gina will help you navigate your way to happiness, success, and fulfillment. To find out more, email Gina at genuinely-u.com. Welcome back to Leadership for Life. Here is your host, Gina Gardner.
Hi there. I just want to spend the last couple of minutes of the show asking you a question. If you're a business leader or you are a professional who's got a lot of expertise and experience, and you'd like to create a book or a program where you can support others to share your expertise and experience, I'm putting together a mastermind group. And if you're interested in being part of that mastermind group, then email me at gina@genuinely-u.com, because there are so many people whose expertise is just within their very narrow confine and would be of so much value to other people. But it can feel daunting to write a book. And if you look on Amazon, you can see that I've written many, many books. So I've got lots of experience, and I have developed, written, created, and delivered many, many programs. And I've been approached by several people. And so I'm going to start up a mastermind group. If you're interested, as I say, please email me and we'll get that put together. So it's Gina, Gina, at genuinely-u.com. We're almost at the end of the show. And I really want to thank Michael again, because the principle of managing your own state, whether that's in your professional life or your business life, whether you're a leader or not, is so critical in terms of whether you're going to achieve and sustain success. And so just by simple things, by breathing deeply into your belly and then counting in and out, as Michael has said, just taking yourself off. The Brits are really great at making cups of tea. And I think one of the reasons why that's often the answer, you've got a problem, let's put the kettle on, is because you get up out of the chair and you have control over the kettle and the cup. And you do something, a task that's got a beginning, a middle, and an ending. And by the time you come back, you've had that opportunity to shift your state. Recognize that you are the one that has the power to make these changes. And by making what seem like very, very simple changes in your life, you can become truly the leader in your own life. So I'm asking you to take that step so you become the leader in your own life. Please let other people know about the show and join us next week on Leadership for Life. Thanks very much indeed. You take care now. Bye-bye.
You have been listening to the Leadership for Life with your host, Gina Gardner. Make sure you tune in to W4CY Radio and Talk 4 TV next Thursday and every Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time for more Leadership for Life. If you missed any part of this episode or just want to hear or see it again, you can find the archive of the TV show on Talk 4 TV's YouTube channel and the podcast of the Leadership for Life on iHeartRadio, Pandora, Spotify, Amazon Music, and wherever you listen to your podcast.